All right, here we are. Good morning, afternoon, everybody. We are here with my apprenticeship, Joanna's mentorship, with the food combining. And we're just going to continue on from last week with good food combining for balancing the hormones and for relieving stress within the body. So, as always, ask any questions that you'd like, and we'll just kind of take it away, Joanna.
Hello, everybody, and good morning, Josiah. Thank you so much for having me here again. And it's always my pleasure to be able to drop in and share nuggets of information that, not only are supporting you and building your knowledge base, but to be able to support everybody else who's listening as well, too, so that we can all grow and expand in our knowledge base, because it's really this information is power, really, and knowledge is power. And so when we really begin to understand how our bodies are functioning, then that gives us the ability to understand the language that they are using to communicate with us, and also be able to support them to do what they need to do and to thrive and to support us in return. And so it wasn't last week because we had to miss last week, but the week before we were talking about food combining in particular, and I really broke down the 5+5. So just as a quick review, I want to just kind of go back to that for a minute. So we talked about this 5+5 equation, which was 1 cooked and 4 raw, and that applies to all of the vegetable categories in our food plate, as well as the protein categories in our food plate. And so if you want to know more about that, go back and watch that one. And we're going to just continue on with that topic today. And I guess the question that came up that we're going to continue with is, how does putting our food together in this way, how does it support hormones? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. And what we need to realize is that, it's not necessarily a direct, this equals that kind of support per se. It's more of a layered aspect. And as with everything in our bodies, it's always layers. And everything has a process, and everything is connected. And so when we are combining our foods in this way, we are supporting our digestive systems immensely by lightening the load and making it really simple and easy for our digestive system to actually function the way that it should, to be able to extract these nutrients that we are taking in through the meal, and to be able to disperse them, metabolize them, disperse them, and get them to where they need to be in the body. And this is really crucial because, especially in our modern times these days, most people spend a lot of time in the world of digestion in their bodies, right? There is just so much that is going on. A lot of times we are not necessarily taking the time to stop and turn on our digestive system first. And so if we're not doing that, if we're not stopping and whatever it is that we've been doing before we eat, and actually kind of give our body the cues that it needs to switch modes, basically to go into rest and digest mode, then that's a number one stress right there. And what happens is, you're just basically shoveling in food, inhaling food. And if you're not chewing it properly, that's another big issue as well, too. And this food is going down, partially digested. The digestive system isn't even turned on. Your body is like, wait, stop. What is going on here? I'm not ready for this. What are we doing? And there's a lot of stress. And then there's all this, franticness, so to speak, that's happening, trying to figure out what it's supposed to be doing. Whereas if you'd have just taken that couple of minutes, take a few good deep breaths, and just focus in on what it is that you are about to do, which is eat your food, that whole process gets avoided of stress, that first layer of stress. The other advantage to putting our meals together in this way is that it provides all the necessary nutrients within that meal for our bodies to be able to do their job and to get what it needs out of that meal. And another reason is because the foods are then are bioavailable at a cellular level as well too. And so, again, there's like layers to all of this as well. But ideally, it is making it really simple, like I said, for our bodies to be able to process this food that is coming down the hatch and that is working to support us, really. And so just a little bit about, digestion too. Digestion starts in the mouth. So it begins, actually, I'm going to dial that back even more. Digestion starts when we smell and see food. That should be the first cue. And so this is where that mindfulness comes in, taking a moment to just actually look at your food, look at your plate, appreciate what it is that you are about to partake of. Whether you prepared it, somebody else prepared it, it's no matter what it is, if it's restaurant food or whatever, the same mindfulness still comes into play. And so seeing that food, observing that food, noticing that in your mind, smelling it. What does it smell like? It should smell divine, and you should be like starting to like feel the saliva building up in your mouth. And then we put that food into our mouth after we've taken some breaths, we've admired this food, we've smelled it. Now our digestive system is turned on. We put the food into our mouth. The saliva has already started to build up. And that's where a lot of the initial enzymes are. And now we get to chew that food. And this is another area where I find a lot of people kind of skip over this step. It's like the food just goes in a big shoveled scoop. It's like 1, 2, quick chews. It's like, okay, done, swallow. And that's really stressful on our digestive systems and on our bodies as well, too, because we haven't totally chewed this food and broken it all down into, it should be really pulpy and almost liquidy by the time you swallow it. And how many people really take the time to actually get their food to that point? And this also plays a role in how satiated you feel and how full you actually feel and how nourished you feel when you finish your meal as well, too. So there's all these different aspects to it. And so we're chewing, taking the time, doing it right. And then when it's finally all chewed up and getting to that pulpy, kind of almost liquid stage, now we get to swallow it. Okay, and then now it's going down the esophagus and it's traveling down and it's going to go through the small intestine. It's going to go through the stomach. It's eventually going to go through the liver and the large intestine until what is no longer necessary is finally eliminated. So that's just a kind of a brief overview of all the layers that the food actually has to travel through. And so when we combine our meals in this way, we create a very easy process for our bodies to be able to go through all of those layers and go through all of the systems that it needs to, and also to be able to extract what we need and disperse it and get it to the areas of our body where it is needed and will support us to be able to function at that really high frequency and at that really high vibration, not just at a surface level, but at a really deep cellular level. And so, the food combining supports, as we're saying, digestion. And more than anything, though, it really supports our microbiomes, especially our gut microbiome. And that comes into play with the whole digestion, as with everything else, because if you've been around for a while, you've heard me say this before, we can't be thriving and we can't be healthy, and no systems in our body will be functioning at optimal level if our gut microbiome is not thriving and at an optimal level of supporting us as well, too. And so this is where the food combining comes into play in that area, because it really supports our microbiomes to be able to have all of what it needs, especially when we are talking about the postbiotics. So if you've heard my estrobolome series and heard me talk about that, we take a really deep dive into the liver and the gut microbiome and its specific effect with estrogen in the body. And so that first layer is the gut microbiome. And by putting our foods together in this way, we are providing the prebiotics, the probiotics, which are necessary in order to make the postbiotics. And this is something that not everybody is familiar with. I know probiotics is something that almost everybody is familiar with now. Prebiotics is still a little bit, unfortunately, on the newer side in the mainstream world. And postbiotics is just starting to come up into the world now, finally. So it's very crucial that we have these postbiotics in our body. That's where the sweet spot is. That's where the real functionality comes in. Is not necessarily from these post and pre, but they're the first initial steps in order to get to the post. And so the pre is what is considered the food that feeds the probiotics or bacteria, and then afterwards, what that becomes is your postbiotic. And so, excuse me. So these prebiotics is, even if you're taking it in a supplemental form, if you actually look, prebiotics usually come in the form of a powder, and sometimes they're already mixed into a probiotic formula and whatnot. My preference is is when they're separate, and then that way they function a lot better that way. And so the beautiful thing is too, though, we can actually take in a lot of the prebiotics through our food. And that's where fresh herbs come into play. If you go back and look at my Instagram stories from today, anybody who's watching this, you will see I posted up my pre-prep salad that I make up a big batch of every few days. And it is full of fresh herbs, especially right now. My garden is just exploding. And so there's fresh parsley in there. There was fresh thyme, chives, chive flowers, sage leaf, sage flowers, mint, dill, just all chopped up into the rest of this salad. And besides tasting amazing, it's actually a way to kind of really take in this medicine through our food and to provide these prebiotics for our bodies to be able to do their job as well too. And so this whole functionality within the gut microbiome is the foundation of our health, which is why I focus on it so much. Our personal ecosystem has to be at its sweet spot and really supporting everything else in our bodies in order to be able to benefit from it the most, really. And so by food combining, something as simple as that, we are actually taking our level of support to a really high level. And also too, I've mentioned frequency, and the food that we take in all has frequency. You are only as alive as the life that's in your food, and that life is frequency. So how much frequency and how high is that frequency and how vibrant is it in the food that you're taking in? Because that's going to equate to how alive you are and how good you feel and how well you function. And so these ecosystems, our personal ecosystems, our microbiomes, are the baseline of everything. And that's why it's so important that we start there and focus there. If we are experiencing love notes or love letters, and these are symptoms or health challenges that I've renamed because it's our body's way of communicating with us. It's not a time to go into a panic and go into a fear mode. When we are experiencing these messages, it's time to stop, be still, tap in and ask, what are you trying to tell me? What am I missing? What do you need? How can I support you? because that's really what you are being asked in that moment. And unfortunately, in our modern times these days, there's just this huge disconnect. We become so disassociated with this communication that our bodies are using to be able to communicate and to work with us. Our bodies pretty much know what to do on their own, but it functions and works a whole lot better when we actually participate in that process. And this is a very key way that we can begin to participate in that process. And sometimes in the beginning, you don't understand that language. Like I said, that we've been so disassociated and so disconnected from this communication that, and we've been taught to fear this communication. And, oh, something needs to be fixed. I'm broken. It's gone horribly wrong. Where's that med? Where's that drug? Where's that something that's supposed to, fix all of this? Which has really taken us out of the realm of really being tapped in and being in control of our own health, because we have the ability to be our own healers, and we have the ability to be able to come back into harmony and balance and to find that beautiful symbiotic relationship with everything, especially with the pathogens in our body. We are like 99% bacteria. We're a lot of things, but primarily water and bacteria. Those are the two big pieces of it. And so being able to, I just totally lost my thought. I'm going to try and, no, I can't even tie that into something. I do apologize for that. But I think the point I was trying to make was that it's very important that we be a part of what our bodies are doing. And we need to have a relationship, right? This is not something that they just go off and do on their own and we just are oblivious to. Nor is it something that we should fear. This is something that we should participate in with love, with gentleness, with kindness, with compassion. Get rid of the guilt, get rid of the fear, get rid of the judgment, because those are negative emotions that actually can be stored as toxins in our body as well too. And so when I talk about the liver, the liver is what filters a lot of these toxins in our body. And that's not just necessarily on a, chemical, physical level. It's also on a mental and emotional level too, because a lot of these thoughts and these belief systems and these stories that we have and that we tell ourselves get stored in our bodies as a toxic load if they're not supporting us to thrive. And if we're holding on to some of these traumas and some of these things that have been either passed down through our lineage, through our ancestors, or we've picked up in our lifetime, this is all getting stored in the body as toxins, and our liver has to deal with that. And so that's putting an extra stress and an extra load on our liver. And all of not only the nutrients and everything else that's going on in our bodies has to be filtered through the liver, but now we're talking about all of these emotions having to be filtered through the liver. And so if we are tying up our digestion, our gut microbiomes, and our liver with constantly attempting to process whatever food we are putting in our mouths, then our bodies aren't really getting to do the other things that they're supposed to be doing, like repairing and rebuilding and restoring and sending information and sending nutrients to where they're supposed to be going. And this is where we start to create that perfect storm that leads to hormone imbalance. And so I hope that makes sense and kind of pulls that all together there for you. And so I'm going to ask Jasaya if she has any questions about that so far, or anything she would like to highlight or summarize from what I have just shared up to this point.
Well, thanks. I feel like just thinking about the process of our digestion really starting from our senses. And I think everyone has experienced that, where you think of something or see something, your mouth starts to water, right? So I mean, there's a biological function, a biological occurrence that happens just by smelling or really thinking about a food, or a sour lemon, you know, your taste buds. I just said sour lemon and my taste buds did what it does when it's
Exactly.
lemon just now. And so, you know, I think that's really cool to just you remember that it starts from there, and then that whole process, that layer, you know, the layering is really important for us to just realize it's not just food and mouth. There's like all these layers as it goes through. Um, and I say one question that I have just about like the liver. So obviously, as you've talked about, and we've talked about the liver, it filters emotions, hormones, chemicals. Does it filter food, or is it the particles of food that has been digested, or fats? Like, could you just kind of break that down a little bit, especially in regards to like the 5+5 eating and the 4 hours between meals for digestion to limit stress? Like, what is the liver's? I know it has so many functions, but just to give us a wide array of the functions, and then what it's kicking out if it can't, and then why the food combining and the giving rest can help like reverse hard love notes that you're having.
Okay, that actually would be like an hour-long discussion. So I'm going to just try and give like a really brief and very simple synopsis of that.
Right.
So by the time the food hits the liver, it's primarily the digestion, and where the food really gets broken down is in the stomach. Right. So this is why the enzymes are so important, right? That we start off in the mouth and with the chewing and everything else. And then as it travels down here, there are different enzymes and different acids and different things that are happening in order to help break down those foods. And they're responding to the types of food that we are eating, because there's different reactions and different responses for the different types of food as well too. And so that comes into play. By the time the liver really gets into the scene, so to speak, just put it really simply, it's the filter. So it's already been broken down, and it's already gone through that process. And some of the nutrients have already kind of started, because we have the spleen and the pancreas being involved in all of this. I didn't even talk about that as well too, but we have the spleen and the pancreas being involved in this. But a really key piece is and this is why the bacteria in our gut microbiomes is so crucial, because what's also happening too from our gut and our stomach is, once these things are entering into that area, there are necessary bacteria that need to send communication through the vagus nerve. And that's our information highway, as I like to refer to it. And that's like a direct connection between the gut and the brain. So this is how the gut brain gets connected. And this is how the brain comes into this whole process as well too. So there is this information, so to speak, that is traveling on these bacteria, as well as on other things as well too. And this is why it's very important to have the specific nutrients and provide them in the meal, so it makes it really easy for our bodies to be able to travel back and forth this information, so to speak. And then the liver is kind of filtering everything through. But the important piece to remember is that the gallbladder is connected to the liver. So I always mix this up for some reason. I always get it backwards. But, oh, look, my notes from the other day are sitting right in front of me. So the liver is the yin organ, and the gallbladder is the yang organ. So that's the harmony. That's the balance right there. And it's the gallbladder that secretes the bile that helps us to break down the fats and to be able to extract what we need from that. So that's kind of a separate, although it's tied into the liver, that's kind of a separate action that's happening there as well too. And so it's very important to have that gap between meals, which we usually say between 3 to 4 hours, because you want that entire process to finish its process and then have a break. Because if you're eating and just constantly, like, you know, modern society today, I often refer to them as constant grazers. You might as well be a cow out in the field, or, you know, one of my sheep out in the field here. You're just constantly putting food, you know, in your mouth and just shoveling it in. And so the body never gets to stop that process. It never gets to take a break. It never gets to really fully complete any of those processes because it's being interrupted and having to start over again. And so it's basically a constant stress on our digestive system. And this is where we begin to we begin to have undigested food particles. We can feel that real like brain fog after eating, and that heaviness and that tiredness because our body is just exhausted. It's just like, oh my God, I've been trying to digest food for 8 hours. Like, when is this going to stop? And when am I going to get to do my actual job for the rest of you? Like, hello? Come on. So that's a very simplified version of it. Like I said, this is all part of a bigger, deeper discussion, but I hope that just gives a little brief overview and, you know, paints a picture of a way that we can remember how our bodies are really working and how they're wanting us to support them so that they can work for us, you know. And when we're constantly grazing like that and constantly, we're really working against our bodies and the way that they were made to function. And that's never a good thing. I mean, we can do it once in a while and it's not going to kill you, right? It's not the end of the world, but it's those things that we do day in, day out constantly that really have the huge impact. And that goes both ways, right? And so it's not just when we're looking at necessarily the bad habits, so to speak, but also, you know, things that are good for us and that support us as well too. We need everything to be in moderation and to be in balance in order to be able to be supportive. Anything in an extreme, no matter what it is going to throw that harmony and that balance out of whack. And so, you know, if you've been following me for a while or even just for a very short period of time, I'm always repeating the same things, which is to really just take the time and allow your body to be able to settle into the functions that it's supposed to be doing and notice. And it's, again, that we like to use the 80-20 rule. That's a pretty popular one. And so it's what you do 80% of the time that is really going to make the difference in how you live. And then that 20% of the time, if you have a good foundation in the 80% of the time, is going to support you for those times when you are not necessarily able. You might be in a situation or it's a special occasion or whatever, but it's not going to have that same stress on the body if you only do it occasionally as opposed to doing it all the time. So that's the key difference right there. Does that make sense? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. So I have one other question, and then we're real close to our 30-minute mark, let alone past our 20-minute one. So, but I just wanted to ask a question, and I was just trying to remember like my own experience through feeling like I can't get enough protein, or that my body's not getting the nourishment that it needs. And I know, of course, that we're all so unique. And even though we, of course, have, you know, these same systems, right? Like our experiences, emotions, and what's inside drastically changes our needs, right? So I know that when I felt like I just needed more protein and I needed to eat more, I was going to pass out. My recollection was that you told me to, you know, just that I wasn't going to die. I had enough food in my body that I was going to be okay. And to still try to have that 4-hour rest between meals, and to combine the meals the best that I could, you know, in the 5+5 way. And when I felt like I was hungry or I needed something, to just like sit and listen into myself, maybe have like some water or tea, and that some other stuff would come. And so I just wanted to touch base about that. And particularly aren't there certain people that have slight hypoglycemia that maybe should be grazing throughout the day? Or aren't there certain people that if eating really grounds their headspace, that's what they should do? Or do you think that process is still, I know it's case by case.
Yeah, so it's really hard to specifically give a definite answer on that. And again, like hypoglycemia is a symptom that your body is out of balance. And so, yes, there is a entirely different way of working with that initially, but no matter where our bodies are, they need a break from digestion.
Right.
So, and I remember with you in the beginning, we were aiming for 3 hours,
Okay.
not the 4 hours. We had shortened the window. We were aiming for that 3 hour mark. And the reason, based on your unique circumstances and situations, it wasn't like I wasn't putting you in jeopardy by saying you're not going to die, don't eat, like, do this. I just want to emphasize that. There was a whole lot of background information and other things going on there, everybody. So just put that out there. But what we were working on was, and this is what happens a lot of the times too, is we don't understand what true hunger is anymore as a race and as humans. We have become just so far removed from that. And we get all caught up in a lot of the emotional stuff. And a lot of that translates into food. There's so much emotion attached to food. And in my experience personally, as well as over 30 years of working with people, 50% of the time, it is not real hunger, if not a higher percentage. I'd even be willing to lean towards 80% of the time. It's not real hunger that we are experiencing. We've just trained ourselves to believe that it's hunger, but there's actually an emotional aspect, and there's something going on an emotional level in the body that subconsciously we have just, okay, we've connected that to food. Food will make it feel better so I don't have to deal with this. And so, and also just checking in, thirst promotes itself as a feeling of hunger a lot of the times. And the majority of humans are dehydrated as well too. So that's what we were really looking at and bringing that into play. And that's why I had you stopping, take a moment, check in. Am I thirsty? Let's drink some water, see how I feel in 20 minutes. If you're still hungry, and we've already worked through the emotional layer, then okay, go ahead and eat.
So that pause.
Yeah. And so after the water, check that, the hydration. And then after that, it's really important to ask, what am I feeling potentially that I don't want to feel? What is my body asking me or presenting for me to take a look at? And sometimes it might not be the right time to dive into that even per se, but to be able to acknowledge that your body is asking you to look at something and say, hey, I hear you. I feel you. I don't have the space right now to really dive into this with you. And I make a commitment that I will do so at this set time, and we will circle back to this. And it's amazing, just that acknowledgement, remember, and that conversation, what a huge shift that can make.
Yeah.
Now we've gone through all of these layers. And again, this is not somebody who has extreme sugar imbalances or other medical conditions. I have to preface that. Then after we've gone through these layers, now we can look at it. And usually I like to give at least 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And if we've worked through all of that, had the water, gotten to that point, and it's like, no, I still feel hunger. Then it's like, okay, then that potentially is real hunger showing up in your body. And that's what real hunger feels like. Because we don't want to be eating when we're full all the time, right? And never experience. Like, it's actually, hunger is a cue. It's an important one. And we need to be able to recognize the real one for what it is so that we can actually support it properly. And that's part of functioning at a really vibrant level. And that's also where this whole being nourished and nurtured on a cellular level comes into play as well too. Because as we are seeing, and as we're always talking, you know, food is not our only nourishment. Our emotions and our thoughts are nourishment as well too. And so we always have to have the balance between all of these in order to be able to experience that vitality and that optimal functioning and health. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, as always, there's so much more, but we'll just have to wait till next week. And
Actually, I will be traveling and I will be away. So we're going to skip next week.
That's right.
So we'll be the last Wednesday of the month, the last Wednesday of June, we'll be back.
Okay, there'll be even more questions then. so, um, so as always, I'm gonna just put in here. This is if you want to know more about the I Live Vibrantly and the Live Vibrantly with Joanna, you can search the book there. It's a great book full of all kinds of information. And reach out to us always with any questions. And my questions keep growing, but that's the process. You know, I just find the body is so amazing, and you know, we have found ways to label it and to see what it is, and there's, I'm sure, just so much more undiscovered, you know, unlabeled aspects, you know, but it does feel like the more and more that we just kind of understand who we're feeding, what it reacts to with regards of thought, frequency, amino acids, who's breaking it down, who's thriving, you know, what battles are happening inside, all that stuff, that we can participate, you know, that it's not just a free for all. But there's a, you know, starting with the sprouts and the 5+5 and
Yeah.
and the digestion, you know, it's really amazing. It's alchemic, really, and
Yeah.
it's so many things. So I'm so grateful to you as always. Thank you. And again, anyone who has questions, reach out to any of us. And like Joanna said last week, any questions you have, we can just bring into the conversation, because that's the whole point.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, everybody who's watching us live and who is watching the recording. It's always great to be here with you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Ciao for now.
Bye.